Hey, what's up everyone? Today we're going to go through two of the key steps that you can use to make your bonsai a lot smaller. And we're going to be using Cotoneaster as the example. So we're going to go from here into these pots and then even down to that kind of size. All right, well, first let's start by looking back a couple months ago to a little session that I did where I potted up a this Cotoneaster into this pot by Pitoon. And I think at the same time I did this one. So let's take a look at that first. One of the great things about doing Mame is that it doesn't take a whole lot of supplies to do any individual tree. So just have this scrap of screen here. Go ahead and screen these pots. And I'm not even going to tie the screen down. This one has this is from Pitoon, and it has a nice size hole there. That one, I'm going to set that in there, and then I'll just put a little bit of soil on the top. And the reason for that is that in order to anchor the tree, if I need to wire it in, I'm going to have to put 2 wires through that hole anyway. Anchoring bonsai in Mame pots can be kind of challenging because a lot of times there's not really a whole lot of room in the pot for the tree, let alone a bunch of wire in order to hold it in place. So it's really tempting to just not tie the tree in, which is certainly something that you could do, but depending on how valuable the tree is and the shape of the pot, you might not want to do that. You know, with one hole pots, there's this idea that you can just sort of make like a little anchor like this, and that you can then basically use that anchor across the bottom of the drainage as a pull point for the tie down wire that you use for the tree. So that works okay. And if I was gonna not use tie wire, this would certainly be a container where I could entertain that idea, because the sides are relatively tall and they're pretty much straight up and down. So if I stuck a plant in there, it wouldn't readily fall out. Whereas if I had a shallow round container that was shorter or something like that, I would definitely need to be using a tie regardless of anything else. So on this one, I used a little cross piece of larger wire, and I'm going to try a different technique on this, which is to use an upside down staple. So just like you might use a staple to create an anchor for the screen, you can create, you know, these little loops like this in order to make a staple. And then rather than putting it down like that and then bending these over on the outside of the pot, I'm going to put this in from the bottom. And that provides a pull point for the tree when we go to anchor it in. So just 2 different versions of the same anchoring technique essentially, and that'll keep the screen from moving around too much, and the soil will keep it there the rest of the way. All right, well, so these were potted up a couple of months ago. Let me move some of these out of the way. And as you can see, these two guys have grown quite a bit. And so the next step, I'm not going to really work on them today, but the next step is going to be to come in here and look at the trunk line, and I'll probably take one of these branches that are in here and start making this into a cascade, maybe cut this part off. But first I want to make sure that it's got plenty of roots. With this one, you can see I didn't just pot this, and that root, because this was nestled into a tray, has started to grow out the bottom of the container already. So I know that it's nicely established, but I'm going to leave it alone for right now. What I am going to do is work on a couple that have been in pots for longer. This one I've been working on for the better part of a couple of years now, and basically just every once in a while I go in and trim. But one of the things I'm noticing is that there are some ants on this plant, and if I look up in here, guessing I'm going to find some scale. So I'll go ahead and pick off any of the scale that I find, as well as just sort of trim back the looks like maybe there's a moth in there too, as well as trim back some of the longer shoots that are coming out. So when this tree was originally put into this container, I wired this section to become the cascade, and then since then it's actually increased in size significantly, and there's no movement in this section, which looked fine, you know, when it was smaller, but because there's no movement in that section, and this is a Mame, I am going to trim it back and force a little bit more movement into the branching. So I'll wait for these guys to come out with new shoots and work on it from there. The other thing that I'm noticing, oh, hello, Mr. Spider. So the other thing that I'm noticing is that there's a little bit of clumpiness up in here. Usually I try not to allow things to grow from underneath other things. So I'm going to cut off that. And then I'll just kind of leave that alone to grow for a little while longer. Now, with this guy, there's a variety of things going on. So this was planted in my Mame tray, and it's got a little berry in here. So I'm going to see if I can reduce the crown. And the other thing was that I haven't completely reduced all the roots that are on here. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the rest of those off so that it's confined just to the pot again. This particular container is by Bob Potts of Rough Cut Pottery. And now, because this is a Mame, it's sort of an exercise in minimalism. And so I want to go in here and kind of think to myself, you know, the trunk at this point has grown enough that it's almost taking up the entirety of the container. So I'm going to clean off some of these old leaves, just sort of debris, and then kind of do the standard bonsai exercise at smaller size, and see if I can find in this mass of crazy twigs going every which direction something that's a little bit more interesting than the rest of the views. And for the, you know, just thinking in the immediate term, you know, I can think long term about this, but just thinking in the immediate term, I think it would be really cool if I had that berry being a little bit more of the focus of the composition. So I'm going to cut off, see if hopefully I won't knock the berry off. Let's try this. Cut these guys back. That's the minor work. Cut that back a little bit. All right, so what I'm looking at here is that, you know, the tree's kind of go in a bunch of different directions, and so if I look at the lines in the tree, I could make like a little kind of informal upright right there, but because it's sitting up at this angle, I don't think this branch actually is helping, so I could have it kind of going that way, Or I could turn it this way, cut that whole part off and have it be like a little cascade with that berry right in the front. And I think that's what I'm going to do, because it'll put it in better scale with the pot. And I want to use my scissors to cut that, but I don't think they're going to do the job. Don't fall off now, Barry. Looks like there's something sticking this leaf. All right, I'm gonna leave it alone. In any case, the wound there that I created will just kind of dry out and heal over time. I'm not too concerned about that right now, but I'm gonna put this back in the tray and let it get back to growing for the next few months until I have some new growth that will be much more compact, I hope, than what I was working with before. Thanks everyone, I hope you enjoyed that, and I'm not sure how much smaller I can go with these things.